Hello, and welcome to this module on scanning. Let's see what we'll be covering. What is scanning? Followed by how do we do scanning? Then what are the goals? And finally, what tools we use. Okay, let's get started. What is scanning? Well, scanning is the second phase of a penetration test. If you recall the phases of a penetration test, you will remember that we start with reconnaissance and then move on to scanning. So we did the reconnaissance during the footprinting module, and now we're moving into the scanning module. But what is scanning all about? Well, it allows a hacker to gain more information about the target system. So if you recall, in footprinting we started gathering information, so scanning is literally just the next phase in getting even more information about the target system. It is always active, so there is no passive scanning. So scanning is generally an active activity, and therefore your chances of being discovered are much higher than during the footprinting phase, specifically the passive footprinting phase. So there's always a little bit of confusion about what's the difference between footprinting and scanning and enumeration, which is the next module. And for all intents and purposes, they all sort of merge together, and they're all part of the really important part of a penetration test, where you're just gathering as much information as possible before you start exploiting or hacking into systems. So footprinting involves some scanning. As you may recall from the previous module, we did do some scanning during the footprinting phase. But this phase is specifically about scanning only, and we look at scanning in detail and what tools and advanced techniques we use to scan even further and be able to find even more information. How do we do this? Well, we focus on the basics. The basics of a scan always are a ping sweep, followed by a port scan, followed by a banner grab, or looking for vulnerabilities. We focus on 4 protocols in scanning. On the layer 3 of the OSI model, it's ICMP and IP, and on layer 4 of the OSI model, we look at TCP and UDP. A good penetration tester will know the difference and learn the following scan types: the full open scan, the stealth or half open scan, the Christmas scan, the fin scan, and the null scan. And we will be looking at those in the lab. You also implement some advanced scanning techniques, which pretty much try and make you a little less obvious, or more stealthy would probably be a better way of putting it. So we look at things like fragmentation, fragmenting your packets. We look at things like using proxies to hide your location. We look at hiding your traffic by tunneling it through HTTP or SSH or even ICMP. And we also look at anonymizing your traffic. In other words, routing you through a whole bunch of different services so that nobody can find your location. What are the goals of scanning? Well, the goals of scanning are pretty much the same as the goals of footprinting, and they are to get more detail about the big picture. So if you recall, in the footprinting phase, we want to get the big picture. In the scanning phase, we want more detail about the big picture. We also use the scanning phase to refine the path you set up in footprinting that you will take to execute the attack in a later phase. So if you recall, during footprinting we define the path. In scanning we're going to refine it, because we are going to get more information which will help us to focus on where we should concentrate our efforts in a later phase. What information do we ideally want at the end of this phase? Well, it's pretty much exactly the same as the footprinting phase. The only difference is we want even more detail. So we still want a list of devices and their roles and configurations, and a network map, and a list of applications with version numbers, and a list of people that work for or at the target. Now, during the footprinting phase, you may have got some of this information, but what the scanning phase is all about is getting all the detail about these things. So, and we go even further in the next module on enumeration, on really refining the big picture and getting as much granular detail as possible about the target before we actually start the gaining access parts of the ethical hacking course. And just remember, as in footprinting, any information about the target, no matter how insignificant it may seem at the time, could prove to be vital down the line. So collect and document everything. What tools do we use? Well, we're going to focus on 4 tools in this module. We're going to look at Nmap in detail, hping, nikto, and finally NSLOOKUP. Now, we covered a little bit of these in footprinting, but in this module we're going to be looking at them in a lot more detail. And then finally, let's just try and remember, as with footprinting, this phase is only about collecting information. In fact, collecting more information than we did during the footprinting phase. And it is not about exploiting any weaknesses that we find, because at this point we're still refining that plan. We're still trying to get all the information so that down the line we can be as efficient as possible in gaining access.